Let's stay with the theme of a recession. The US seeing those two contractions, and last week the Bank of England warned of a protracted recession in Britain. So we're asking tonight, are we in South Africa looking at the prospect of a recession? How soon? How long could it last? Of course, a global recession likely spells recession here at home, which we define as 2 quarters of a contraction or a negative growth in GDP. We're joined by SABC News Economics Editor Tshepo Mongoai. Great to have you with us as always. So during the last Reserve Bank, I mean, the talk was of 2% growth. That's well off 0%. Could we go from 2% to nothing, to recession?
Well, just a bit of background. We started the year very well in terms of economic growth. Things were looking up. We're emerging from all the issues emanating from COVID-19, and things were promising, and we recorded 1.9% economic growth, and we were quite positive that things will improve. However, South Africa, it's a mixed bag of international factors and our own goals. The second quarter numbers have not been released. They're not out yet, but there's a lot of speculation that it could be a contraction. In the US, of course, we've had 2 consecutive quarters of contraction. Although, if you follow the discussions, they don't really want to accept that it is.
What defines a recession? They in fact have a panel that decides when it's a recession or not.
Absolutely, but we know it's 2 consecutive quarters is a technical recession. Yeah. So they've reported that we have not, and there are no indications that perhaps we could be in that predicament. But then the issue that I touched on, our own goals, especially in the second quarter, where we could see a contraction, 0.8, 0.9%, a contraction has been factored in. If you follow all the data that have been released, main one being mining and manufacturing, they haven't really been doing well as such, and they've carried us in the previous quarter, especially in the first quarter, and now they are not doing the same. We are blaming industrial actions. We are also blaming the supply logistical issues. We're not getting our goods on time, and also it's a pity that we are not capitalizing on this good commodity price that have came with all the challenges globally. I mean, you were talking about the international oil price now. I mean, at some point it was 130, but still, even now, commodity prices are still giving a good price, and we have not really capitalized on that benefit of high commodity prices.
So that would be the gold miners, the platinum miners, and all those platinum-linked materials.
Absolutely, and manufacturing as well. Same factors as well. We have issues of load shedding. That's another issue that we've seen in the second quarter. I mean, up to stage 6 of load shedding. Problematic for the industries. They could not run their factories as they should. Input costs, that's another issue that we've seen in the second quarter. Prices, input costs have surged. I mean, look at PPI, 16%, and those prices still going to filter down to many areas. I mean, inflation is widespread at the moment, and it's a bit of an issue. Of course, the Reserve Bank is doing its bit to assist in ensure that it's not as broad-based as it should, but it's showing itself in the economy. There are signs that industries are actually battling with this high input costs. Not always easy to pass on some of those benefits to the end users.
The fact is, I mean, we've been below average in terms of growth, below the global average. And if the world goes into recession, it'll be very hard for South Africa not to. That's the fact.
Yes, it would be, but let's go to the US, for example. You've seen last week jobs numbers, better than expected, 528,000 jobs that were created. Despite that, we're seeing inflation at a 40-year high, eroding the high income that the Americans are earning. So it's a bit of mix. The fact that you're seeing the US economy continue to create so much job it's a positive fact.
So maybe the
actually-
US will emerge and then we won't have to follow suit in terms of 2 quarters of contraction.
Absolutely. Because already third quarter projections are we will see a growth in the third quarter. So it's unlikely that it will result in another contraction. So if you look at the factor that I've touched on, we hope that we don't repeat all this. There's some answers and solutions on the table in terms of how we can avoid stage 6 load shedding. And hopefully if we do, then we will keep the momentum going. But another saving grace is consumer spending. It has been buoyant. It's been doing very well. And it has kept us going, at least to keep above water during this difficult second quarter. So consumer continues spending, and I suppose it's partly because of above inflation wage settlement, although inflation has moved slightly higher now. But we are seeing, many of our retailers, judging by the financial statement, you can see that they continue to defy the odds, despite everything else.
And finally, I mean, everybody's saying it also depends on the length of the war in Ukraine, but we are seeing the oil price at least come down, so a bit of a relief as well.
Yes, I think we're likely to see these commodity prices cooling. There are indications that on the horizon we could, see inflation coming back and also coming back within the Reserve Bank target, at least by next year, maybe in the third, fourth quarter. So based on that, it's a positive sign that we have at least a time frame of when this difficult period would last, especially for consumers who are really finding it hard, having to pay very high interest rates and high food prices, cost of living being high as it is. But indeed, it's a cycle. And of course, a cycle must reach its peak before it comes down.
All right, thank you so much for that update. Hopefully we avoid the dreaded R word, recession here in South Africa. But just looking at the prospects, given some of the different data coming out, that was SABC News Economics Editor, Tshepo Mongoai.